Desolation and discovery. The twin suns of Sax's Nine cast long shadows across the barren landscape, their dying light painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. Amidst the desolation of the planet's western wastes, a lone figure stumbled forward, each step a battle against exhaustion and despair. Zara, once a proud member of the luminary council of her homeworld, Astraea, now found herself reduced to a refugee on this unforgiving world. Her delicate frame, usually adorned with the bioluminescent markings of her people, was dulled by dust and fatigue. Wings that should have shimmered with ethereal light hung limp and damaged at her back, rendering her flightless. She had been running for days, maybe weeks. Time had lost all meaning in her desperate bid for survival. The attack on her convoy had come swiftly and without warning. The Drekari, a warmongering species known for their brutality, had ambushed the peaceful Astraean delegation as they journeyed to a galactic summit. In the chaos that followed, Zara had managed to reach an escape pod, but not before witnessing the slaughter of her companions. The pod had crash-landed on Sax's Nine, a frontier world on the edge of explored space. Zara had dragged herself from the wreckage, knowing that to remain would mean certain death if the Drekari came searching for survivors, and so she walked, her body screaming for rest, her spirit clinging to the faintest glimmer of hope. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Zara's strength finally gave out. She collapsed to her knees, her vision blurring as she gazed at the emerging stars above. In that moment, she wondered if this would be her final resting place, forgotten and alone on a world that cared nothing for her plight. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Miles away, in a ramshackle outpost that served as the planet's primary spaceport, Jake Morrison was preparing for another routine salvage run. At 32, Jake was a man who wore the weight of his experiences like armor. His weathered face, framed by unkempt dark hair, bore the scars of a life lived on the fringes of civilized space. As he ran through the pre-flight checks on his ship, the aptly named Second Chance, Jake's mind wandered to the events that had led him to this point. Once a decorated officer in the Earth Defense Force, he had seen his fair share of combat against various alien threats. But it was the loss of his squad during a botched mission that had driven him to resign his commission and seek a simpler life among the stars. Now, he made his living as a scavenger and occasional smuggler, taking on jobs that most would consider too dangerous or not worth the effort. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept fuel in his ship and food on his table. More importantly, it allowed him to maintain his solitude, away from the complications of his past. As Jake fired up the Second Chance's engines, a notification flashed on his console. An automated distress beacon had been detected, originating from somewhere in the western wastes. Jake frowned, his hand hovering over the controls. Standard protocol dictated that all distress calls be reported to the local authorities. But on a backwater world like Sax's Nine, that often meant long delays and potential danger for those in need. For a moment, Jake considered ignoring the signal. He had a job to do after all, and getting involved in other people's problems had only ever brought him grief. But something tugged at his conscience, a remnant of the man he used to be before disillusionment had set in. With a resigned sigh, Jake altered his course. "Looks like we're taking a detour, old girl," he muttered to his ship, the engines thrumming in response as he guided the vessel towards the source of the distress call. As the Second Chance soared over the desolate terrain, Jake kept a keen eye on his scanners. The western wastes were notorious for their unpredictable weather patterns and treacherous rock formations. It was easy to see how someone could find themselves in trouble out here. The ship's sensors pinpointed the origin of the distress beacon, guiding Jake to a small valley nestled between towering cliffs. As he brought the Second Chance in for a landing, the ship's spotlights illuminated a scene of devastation. The wreckage of what appeared to be an escape pod lay scattered across the valley floor, twisted metal glinting in the artificial light. Jake armed himself with a pulse rifle and medical kit before descending the ship's ramp. The air was thin and cold, carrying the acrid scent of burnt circuitry. He moved cautiously, sweeping his weapon from side to side as he approached the crash site. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing off the cliff walls. "Anyone still alive out here?" At first, there was no response save for the whistle of wind through the rocks. But as Jake circled the largest piece of wreckage, he caught a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision. Spinning around, he found himself face to face with a sight that made him question his own eyes. Lying on the ground before him was a being unlike any he had encountered in his years of space travel. Her form was vaguely humanoid, but there the similarities ended. Delicate, almost translucent skin bore intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. Wings, tattered and broken, sprouted from her back, and her features were alien yet hauntingly beautiful. The creature's eyes, large and luminous, fixed on Jake with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She tried to speak, but only a weak rasp escaped her lips. Jake lowered his weapon, his training kicking in as he assessed the situation. The alien was clearly injured and in no condition to pose a threat. He knelt beside her, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Easy there," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. Can you understand me?" The alien nodded weakly, her eyes never leaving Jake's face. He saw intelligence there, and a deep wariness that spoke of a harrowing ordeal. "My name's Jake," he continued, reaching for his medical kit. "I picked up your distress call. Looks like you've been through hell. Can you tell me what happened?" The alien struggled to form words, her voice barely above a whisper. "Zara," she managed to say, one hand weakly gesturing to herself. "Austrian, attacked. Drekari." Jake's brow furrowed at the mention of the Drekari. He had encountered that particular species during his military days, and the memories were far from pleasant. If they were involved, the situation was more complicated than a simple crash landing. "All right, Zara," Jake said, his voice taking on a gentler tone. "We need to get you out of here. Can you move at all?" Zara attempted to rise, but immediately fell back with a pained gasp. Jake could see now that her injuries were extensive: burns, lacerations, and what looked like signs of severe dehydration. She wouldn't last much longer without proper medical attention. Making a quick decision, Jake carefully scooped Zara into his arms. She was surprisingly light, her frail body trembling against his chest. As he carried her towards the second chance, Jake couldn't help but marvel at the strange turns his life had taken. Here he was, a disgraced ex-soldier turned scavenger, now playing rescuer to an alien refugee on a godforsaken rock in the middle of nowhere. Once aboard the ship, Jake laid Zara on the small cot in what passed for the Second Chance's medical bay. It wasn't much, just a few basic supplies and a rudimentary medical scanner, but it would have to do. As he began treating her most immediate injuries, Jake's mind raced with the implications of what he had stumbled upon. If the Drekari were indeed pursuing Zara, it wouldn't be long before they tracked her to Xerxes 9. And when they arrived, they wouldn't be in a mood to ask questions politely. Jake knew he should alert the authorities, wash his hands of the whole affair, and disappear back into the vastness of space. But as he looked down at Zara's fragile form, something stirred within him. It was a feeling he thought he had left behind years ago, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger at the injustices of the universe. In that moment, Jake made a choice that would alter the course of his life forever. "Hang in there, Zara," he murmured, more to himself than to his unconscious patient. "I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I'm going to get you out of it." With a determined set to his jaw, Jake made his way to the cockpit. He'd input the coordinates for a hidden refueling station he knew of in a nearby system, a place where he could lay low and figure out his next move. As the Second Chance lifted off from Xerxes 9's surface, Jake cast one last look at the desolate landscape below. He had come to this world seeking isolation and a chance to forget his past. Instead, he found himself embarking on a journey that would test everything he thought he knew about himself, about humanity's place in the galaxy, and about the true meaning of redemption. As the ship broke atmosphere and the stars welcomed them into their cold embrace, Jake Morrison allowed himself a small smile. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The adventure had only just begun. Unlikely alliance. The second chance drifted through the inky void of space, its course set for the hidden refueling station Jake had mentioned. In the ship's cramped medical bay, Jake sat vigil over his unexpected passenger, monitoring Zara's vital signs with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Hours had passed since the hasty departure from Saxis 9, and Zara had yet to regain full consciousness. Her alien physiology made treating her injuries a challenge, but Jake had done what he could with his limited medical knowledge and supplies. Now, all he could do was wait and hope. As he studied Zara's delicate features, Jake found himself marveling at the twists of fate that had brought them together. He had spent years trying to distance himself from his past, from the weight of responsibility that came with caring about others. And yet, here he was, risking everything for a being he barely knew. A soft moan from Zara drew Jake from his musings. Her eyes fluttered open, luminous and disoriented, before focusing on Jake's face. Where am I?" she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake leaned forward, offering what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "You're safe," he said. "You're aboard my ship, the second chance. I found you in the wreckage on Saxis 9. Do you remember anything about what happened?" Zara's brow furrowed as she struggled to piece together her fractured memories. "The attack," she murmured. "The Drakari. They came out of nowhere. Our delegation was on its way to the Galactic Council. We were supposed to present evidence of their war crimes, but somehow they knew. They were waiting for us." Jake's expression darkened at the mention of the Galactic Council. He had long since lost faith in the bureaucratic body that claimed to govern interstellar affairs. In his experience, they were more concerned with maintaining the status quo than actually addressing the injustices that plagued the galaxy. "So you're some kind of diplomat?" Jake asked, trying to piece together the larger picture. Zara nodded weakly. Was a member of the Lunary Council of Australia. We are a peaceful race, dedicated to fostering understanding between species. But the Drakari, they see our philosophy as a threat to their expansionist goals. Jake could hear the pain in Zara's voice, not just physical but emotional. The weight of her lost companions, the failure of her mission, it all pressed down on her like a tangible force. "Listen," Jake said, his tone gentle but firm. "You need to rest and regain your strength. We're headed to a place where we can lay low for a while, figure out our next move. The Drakari won't find you here." Zara's eyes widened with sudden alarm. "No, you don't understand. The data crystal, I had it with me when I escaped. It contains all the evidence we gathered against the Drakari, if they get their hands on it." Jake held up a hand to calm her. "Easy. I didn't find any crystal when I rescued you, but I can go back and search the wreckage more thoroughly once you're stable. For now, you need to focus on healing." As if to emphasize his point, the ship's medical scanner beeped insistently, indicating that Zara's vital signs were fluctuating dangerously. Jake administered a mild sedative, watching as the Austrian's eyes slowly closed and her breathing steadied. With Zara resting, Jake made his way to the cockpit, his mind churning with the implications of what he had learned. He had stumbled into something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. The fate of entire worlds could hinge on the information Zara carried. As he settled into the pilot's seat, a warning light flashed on the console. The second chance's long-range sensors had picked up an anomaly, a distortion in space that could only mean one thing: a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Jake's hands flew over the controls, bringing up a visual of the area. His blood ran cold as he recognized the sleek, predatory lines of a Drakari warship. Somehow, they had managed to track Zara's escape pod to Saxis 9, and now they were hot on their trail. "Damn it," Jake muttered, quickly plotting a new course. The refueling station would have to wait. They needed to disappear, and fast. As the second chance changed direction, Veering towards a dense asteroid field that might offer some cover, Jake felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. It had been years since he'd been in a real fight, but old instincts die hard. He found himself falling back into the mindset of the soldier he once was, assessing threats and formulating strategies. The Drakari ship was larger and better armed, but the second chance had speed and maneuverability on its side. Jake pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through the asteroid field with a precision that spoke of years of experience. Behind them, the Drakari opened fire, energy beams lancing through space and vaporizing smaller asteroids in their path. Jake gritted his teeth, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that strained both ship and pilot to their limits. He needed to buy time, to find a way to lose their pursuers long enough to make a jump to hyperspace. As he guided the ship deeper into the asteroid field, Jake's mind raced. He knew he couldn't outrun the Drakari forever. Sooner or later, they would corner him or get lucky with a shot. He needed a plan, something unexpected that might give them an edge. His eyes fell on the ship's cargo manifest, and a desperate idea began to form. Among the various salvaged goods in his hold was a canister of highly volatile fuel cells, unstable and dangerous, but potentially their salvation if used correctly. With one hand on the controls, Jake used the other to program a series of commands into the ship's computer. It was a risky plan, one that could easily backfire and leave them both as space debris. But with the Drakari closing in, options were running out. "Hold on, Zara," Jake called out, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "This might get a little rough." With a deep breath, Jake executed his plan. The cargo bay doors opened, ejecting the canister of fuel cells directly into the path of the pursuing Drakari ship. At the same moment, Jake fired the second chance's rear-mounted energy weapon, not at the Drakari, but at the canister itself. The result was spectacular and terrifying. The fuel cells detonated with a force that dwarfed anything the small freighter could have produced on its own. A shockwave of energy and superheated gas expanded outward, engulfing the Drakari ship and sending smaller asteroids tumbling in all directions. Jake didn't wait to see the full effects of his improvised bomb. He pushed the second chance to its absolute limit, navigating through the chaos of tumbling rocks and energy discharges. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems strained under the stress, but Jake blocked it all out, focused solely on their escape. It wasn't until they had cleared the asteroid field and the sensors showed no sign of pursuit that Jake allowed himself to relax slightly. He engaged the hyperdrive, and the stars stretched into lines as the second chance leaped into faster-than-light travel. Only then did Jake slump back in his seat, his hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. He had done it. They had escaped, at least for now. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Drakari would not give up so easily, not when the stakes were so high. Jake made his way back to the medical bay, needing to check on Zara after their harrowing escape. He found her awake, her luminous eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. What happened?" she asked, her voice stronger than before. Jake managed a weary smile. "Let's just say we had to take a bit of a detour. The Drakari found us, but we gave them the slip. For now, at least." Zara's expression softened, gratitude shining in her alien features. "You risked your life for me," she said softly. "Why? You don't even know me." Jake paused, considering her question. It was something he had been asking himself since the moment he decided to answer that distress call. Finally, he shrugged, offering a crook smile. "Maybe I'm just tired of running away from the things that matter," he said. "Or maybe I'm finally remembering the person I used to be, someone who believed in standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." Zara reached out, her delicate hand grasping Jake's rough one. The touch sent a strange, tingling sensation up his arm, alien, yet not unpleasant. "Then I am fortunate indeed," Zara said, "to have found not just a rescuer, but an ally. Thank you, Jake Morrison. I fear we have a long and dangerous road ahead of us." Jake nodded, squeezing Zara's hand gently. "Get some rest," he said. We fought ourselves some time, but we need to plan our next move carefully. The Drakari won't give up, and we still need to find that data crystal of yours." As Jake turned to leave, Zara called out to him once more. "Jake," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We will succeed. We must. The fate of so many depends on it." Jake paused at the door, looking back at the wounded alien who had so unexpectedly entered his life. In that moment, he felt the last of his cynicism and world-weariness fall away. For the first time in years, he had a purpose greater than mere survival. "We will," he agreed, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "Together." As Jake returned to the cockpit to plot their course, he felt a change within himself. The man who had spent years running from his past, from connection, from purpose, that man was gone. In his place stood someone new, or perhaps someone rediscovered. Someone ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, not just for his own sake, but for the sake of a galaxy that desperately needed heroes. The second chance sailed on through the vast expanse of space, carrying with it two unlikely allies and the hope for a better future. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, filled with challenges that would test them both to their limits. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, Jake Morrison allowed himself to believe that anything was possible. The stars beckoned, and with them, the promise of adventure, redemption, and a chance to make a real difference in the universe. Jake smiled to himself as he gazed out at the cosmic tapestry before him. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it head-on. The unlikely alliance of a disillusioned human and a wounded alien diplomat had only just begun, but already it held the potential to change the course of galactic history. As the second chance cruised through hyperspace, neither Jake nor Zara could have imagined the incredible journey that lay ahead, a journey that would challenge their beliefs, test their resolve, and ultimately showcase the very best of what humanity, and indeed all sentient beings, could achieve when united for a common cause. Pursuit through the stars. The second chance emerged from hyperspace in a remote sector of the galaxy, far from the usual space lanes and commerce routes. Jake had chosen this location carefully, an old smuggler's hideout he'd heard whispers about during his years on the fringe. If they were going to regroup and plan their next move, they needed someplace off the grid. As the ship approached a small, unremarkable planetoid, Jake felt a presence behind him. He turned to see Zara standing in the doorway of the cockpit, her luminous form seeming to glow even in the dim light of the ship's interior. "You should be resting," Jake said, though there was no real admonishment in his tone. He had to admit he was impressed by the Astrian's resilience. In the day since their narrow escape from the Drakari, Zara had made remarkable progress in her recovery. Zara moved to stand beside him, her otherworldly eyes taking in the view of the planetoid growing larger in the view screen. "I've rested enough," she said softly, "and I cannot sit idle while so much hangs in the balance. Tell me, Jake Morrison, what is this place?" Jake guided the ship into a low orbit, scanning for the hidden entrance he knew must be there. "It's called Haven," he explained. "At least that's what the spacers and outlaws call it. It's a refuge of sorts, for those who need to disappear for a while. If we're going to figure out our next move, this is the safest place to do it." As if on cue, a signal flashed on the console, coordinates for a landing site transmitted on an encrypted frequency. Jake smiled grimly. The old protocols were still in place, it seemed. "Hold on," he warned Zara. "This might get a bit bumpy." The second chance descended through the planetoid's thin atmosphere, following the transmitted coordinates to a narrow canyon barely visible from orbit. As they approached, a section of the canyon wall shimmered and disappeared, revealing a hidden hangar carved into the rock itself. Jake brought the ship in for a gentle landing, powering down the engines as the holographic camouflage re-engaged behind them, sealing them off from the outside world. For a moment, both human and Astrian sat in silence, taking in the gravity of their situation. "We should be safe here, at least for a little while," Jake said finally, standing and stretching. "But we can't stay long. The Drakari are relentless, and they have resources we can only imagine. Sooner or later, they'll pick up our trail again. Zara nodded, her expression a mixture of determination and worry. Then we must use this time wisely. The data crystal, we need to find it. Without that evidence, we have no hope of stopping the Drekari's expansion. Jake ran a hand through his disheveled hair, thinking, agreed, but we can't just go charging back to HFY. The Drekari will be watching that system closely now. We need information, allies, maybe even some upgraded gear if we're going to pull this off. As they exited the ship, they were greeted by the sight of a vast underground complex. The hangar opened up into a sprawling network of tunnels and cave-ins, all bustling with activity. Beings from dozens of different species mingled in the artificial light, trading goods, information, and who knew what else. Jake led Zara through the crowded passageways, keeping a protective hand on her arm. Despite her recovery, the Australian still looked fragile compared to the rougher denizens of Haven. More than a few curious glances were cast their way, but Jake's hard-eyed stare was enough to discourage any unwanted attention. They made their way to a dimly lit tavern tucked away in one of the smaller caverns. Jake scanned the room, his eyes finally settling on a grizzled Centaurian seated in a shadowy corner. The four-armed alien raised one of its hands in a subtle greeting, and Jake nodded in return. "Wait here," he told Zara, guiding her to a vacant table. "I need to talk to an old contact. With any luck, he might have some information that can help us." As Jake made his way across the room, Zara took in her surroundings with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. This place, with its diverse array of species and barely concealed undercurrent of danger, was unlike anything she had experienced in her sheltered life on Astraea. She found herself marveling at Jake's easy navigation of this complex social ecosystem. At the Centaurian's table, Jake slid into an empty seat. "Korax," he said by way of greeting. "It's been a while." The alien's four eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that passed for a smile among his kind. "Jake Morrison," Korax rumbled, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "I'd heard you'd gone straight. What brings you back to the shadows?" Jake leaned in, keeping his voice low. "I need information, Korax, about the Drekari. Word is they're making big moves, and I need to know what they're up to." Korax's eyes narrowed, all four limbs tensing slightly. "Dangerous waters, old friend. The Drekari aren't to be trifled with. What's your stake in this?" Jake hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he decided on a version of the truth. "Let's just say I've got an interest in seeing their plans disrupted. There's a lot of innocent lives at stake." The Centaurian studied Jake for a long moment, then let out a low chuckle. "The soldier boy's still in there after all, eh? All right, I might have something for you, but it'll cost you." They haggled for a few minutes, eventually settling on a price that made Jake wince, but didn't quite bankrupt him. In exchange, Korax provided a data chip containing intelligence on recent Drekari movements, including some disturbing reports of increased military activity near several peaceful systems. As Jake stood to leave, Korax caught his arm with one of his lower limbs. "Watch yourself, Jake," the alien warned, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "The Drekari have eyes and ears everywhere these days. Whatever you're planning, make it quick. The galaxy's changing, and not for the better." Jake nodded his thanks and made his way back to Zara, who had been watching the exchange with keen interest. As he slid into the seat across from her, he couldn't help but notice how out of place she looked in this den of smugglers and outlaws. Her natural luminescence seemed to push back the shadows around them, drawing more than a few curious glances. "We need to move," Jake said quietly, showing her the data chip. "I've got some leads, but we can't stay here long. Too many eyes, too many chances for word to get back to the Drekari." Zara nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let us not waste any more time. What is our next step?" Jake pocketed the chip and stood, offering Zara his hand. "First, we need to upgrade the second chance. If we're going to have any shot at getting back to Xerxes 9 and finding that data crystal, we need better shields, weapons, the works. Then we need to gather any allies we can trust. This isn't a two-person job anymore. As they made their way back through the winding tunnels of Haven, Jake's mind raced with plans and contingencies. He had contacts scattered throughout this sector, old squad mates, fellow smugglers, even a few intelligence operatives who owed him favors. It was time to call them in. But even as he planned, a part of Jake marveled at how quickly his life had changed. Just days ago, he had been content to drift through the stars, taking odd jobs and avoiding entanglements. Now here he was, planning what amounted to a covert operation against one of the most dangerous forces in the galaxy. He glanced at Zara, walking beside him with a grace that seemed at odds with their rough surroundings. In the short time he had known her, the Austrian had shown a strength and determination that belied her fragile appearance. Jake found himself drawn to her, not just out of a sense of duty or the thrill of the mission, but because of who she was, a being of peace forced to become a warrior for her people's survival. As they reached the second chance, Jake paused, turning to face Zara. "I need to know," he said, his voice low and serious. "Are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no turning back. The Drakari will hunt us to the ends of the galaxy. We could die out there, or worse." Zara met his gaze unflinchingly, her luminous eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "I am sure, Jake Morrison. My people, and countless others, face enslavement or extinction if the Drakari are not stopped. I cannot stand idly by and allow that to happen. Whatever the cost, whatever the danger, I am prepared to face it." Jake nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "All right then, let's go save the galaxy." With renewed purpose, they boarded the second chance. As Jake began the pre-flight sequence, he felt a familiar mix of excitement and trepidation. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the hangar doors slid open, revealing the star-studded expanse of space beyond. As they lifted off, leaving the relative safety of Haven behind, Jake knew that they were embarking on a journey that would test them both to their limits. But as he glanced at Zara, seeing the determination in her alien features, Jake felt a surge of confidence. Together, they represented the best of their respective species, human ingenuity and resilience paired with Austrian wisdom and compassion. It was an unlikely alliance, but one that just might have the power to change the course of galactic history. The second chance accelerated away from the planetoid, its course set for the first of many destinations in their quest to gather allies and resources. As the stars streaked by, Jake allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they would face, he knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The pursuit through the stars had begun in earnest. The fate of countless worlds now rested in the hands of a jaded human spacer and a wounded alien diplomat. It was a responsibility that would have seemed impossible just days ago, but now felt like the culmination of everything Jake had experienced in his tumultuous life. With Zara by his side and a galaxy full of both peril and possibility ahead, Jake Morrison steeled himself for the adventure of a lifetime. The second chance surged forward, carrying with it the hopes of billions and the indomitable spirit of two beings united in a common cause. The stars beckoned, and with them the promise of a future worth fighting for. Haven and healing. The second chance dropped out of hyperspace near a nondescript system on the outer rim of the galaxy. Jake had chosen this location carefully. It was home to an old friend, someone he hoped might be able to help them in their seemingly impossible mission. As they approached the third planet, a lush green and blue orb that looked startlingly like Earth, Jake felt Zara's presence behind him once again. He was getting used to the faint glow she emitted, finding it oddly comforting in the darkness of space. "Where are we?" Zara asked, her melodious voice tinged with curiosity. Jake smiled, inputting the landing coordinates he had memorized years ago. This is Sanctuary, he explained. It's a haven for refugees and outcasts from all over the galaxy, and it's home to someone who might be able to help us upgrade the second chance and plan our next move. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, Zara gasped in wonder. Unlike the barren wastes of Saxes 9 or the artificial environment of Haven, Sanctuary was a world teeming with life. Vast forests stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by winding rivers and the occasional clearing. Jake guided the ship towards one such clearing, where a collection of structures that looked more like living trees than buildings awaited them. As they touched down, Zara could see figures moving about, a diverse array of species all coexisting in this hidden paradise. "Welcome to New Avalon," Jake said as he powered down the engines. "It's not much, but it's probably the safest place in the galaxy for people who need to disappear for a while." They disembarked, the warm, fragrant air of Sanctuary enveloping them. Zara closed her eyes for a moment, basking in the planet's natural energy. Jake watched her, marveling at how her bioluminescent patterns seemed to pulse in harmony with the world around them. Their arrival had not gone unnoticed. A small group was approaching, led by a tall, willowy being with skin like bark and eyes that shimmered like sunlight through leaves. Jake stepped forward, a genuine smile breaking across his usually guarded features. "Silaria," he called out in greeting. "It's been too long." The tree-like being's features rearranged into what might have been a smile. "Jake Morrison," Silaria replied, her voice like rustling leaves. "I had begun to think you had forgotten us out here on the rim." Jake shook his head, suddenly looking a bit sheepish. "Never," he assured her. "Just got a little lost for a while. But I'm back now, and I need your help." Silaria's gaze shifted to Zara, who stood slightly behind Jake, taking in the strange new environment. "I see you've brought a friend," the Guardian of Sanctuary observed. "An Astrian, if I'm not mistaken. Rare to see one so far from home." Zara stepped forward, bowing slightly in respect. "I am Zara, of the Luminary Council," she introduced herself. "And I fear I no longer have a home to return to." Silaria's expression softened, compassion evident in her alien features. "Then you are welcome here, Zara of Astraea. Sanctuary opens its arms to all who seek refuge." As the group made their way towards the living structures of New Avalon, Jake quickly filled Silaria in on their situation. The Drakari threat, the missing data crystal, and their desperate plan to somehow stop a galactic superpower with nothing but a retrofitted freighter and sheer determination. Silaria listened intently, her leafy brow furrowing with concern. When Jake finished, she was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, she spoke. "What you propose is dangerous, perhaps even impossible," she said gravely. "But if what you say is true, the consequences of inaction are unthinkable." They arrived at what appeared to be a massive tree, its trunk hollowed out to form a comfortable living space. Inside, holographic displays flickered to life, showing star charts and data streams from across the galaxy. "You'll need more than just an upgraded ship," Silaria said, her tone businesslike now. "You'll need allies, information, and a plan that doesn't rely solely on luck and human stubbornness." Jake grinned at that last part. "Hey, luck and stubbornness have gotten me this far," he quipped. Zara stepped forward, her luminous eyes fixed on the galactic display. "We need to return to Saxes 9, she said softly. "The data crystal. It's our only hope of exposing the Drakari's true nature to the Galactic Council." Silaria nodded, manipulating the holographic display to zoom in on the Saxes system. "It won't be easy," she warned. "The Drakari have undoubtedly increased their presence there since your escape. A direct approach would be suicide." Jake leaned against the living wall of the tree structure, his mind racing with possibilities. "What if we didn't go in directly?" he mused aloud. "Silaria, you've got connections all over the rim. What if we put together a team, a small, elite group that could slip past the Drakari defenses?" The Guardian of Sanctuary considered this, her leafy fingers dancing over the holographic controls. "It's possible," she admitted. I know of a few individuals who might be willing to take on such a risk for the right cause. As they discussed potential allies and strategies, Zara found herself overwhelmed by the scope of what they were planning. She had spent her life in the rarefied atmosphere of diplomatic circles, where conflicts were settled with words and treaties. This world of covert operations and daring heists was entirely foreign to her. Sensing her unease, Jake stepped away from the planning session and approached Zara. "Hey," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Zara looked up at him, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of determination and fear. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this, Jake," she confessed. "My people are diplomats, scholars. We're not warriors or spies." Jake's expression softened, and he guided Zara to a quiet corner of the room. "Listen," he said, his voice low and intense. "Being a warrior isn't about knowing how to fight or pull off daring heists. It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are against you." He gestured towards the holographic display, where Solaria was outlining possible infiltration routes. "Look at what you've already done. You survived an attack that wiped out the rest of your delegation. You've crossed half the galaxy with a stranger, trusting your instincts and refusing to give up hope. That's real courage, Zara. That's the kind of strength we need to pull this off." Zara was quiet for a moment, absorbing Jake's words. When she looked up at him again, there was a new resolve in her eyes. "You're right," she said, her voice stronger now. "My people may not be warriors in the traditional sense, but we have our own strengths. Perhaps it's time the galaxy saw what an Australian can really do when pushed to the brink." Jake grinned, feeling a surge of pride for his unlikely partner. "That's the spirit," he said. "Now come on, let's go figure out how to save the galaxy." They rejoined Solaria at the holographic display, where the plan was starting to take shape. Over the next few days, New Avalon became a hive of activity as Solaria called in favors, and Jake reached out to old contacts. The Second Chance underwent a dramatic transformation, its systems upgraded with cutting-edge technology that blurred the line between legal and experimental. A team began to form, a motley crew of outcasts, rebels, and specialists from across the galaxy. There was Crix, a Velucrian hacker with a knack for slicing even the most secure systems. Nara, a former Drakari soldier who had defected after witnessing one atrocity too many. And Zev, a shape-shifting morphin who could infiltrate even the most secure facilities. As the preparations continued, Zara threw herself into training, determined to contribute more than just her knowledge of Drakari politics. Jake found himself impressed by her dedication, watching as she learned the basics of combat and stealth from their new allies. One evening, as the twin suns of Sanctuary were setting, Jake found Zara alone on a balcony overlooking the lush forests of New Avalon. She was practicing a meditation techniques Solaria had taught her, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing slowly in time with her breathing. "You're really taking to all this," Jake observed, leaning against the railing beside her. Zara opened her eyes, offering him a small smile. "I must," she said simply. "Too much depends on our success. I cannot afford to be the weak link in our chain." Jake shook his head, marveling at the transformation he had witnessed in the once fragile diplomat. "You were never weak, Zara," he said softly. "You just needed to find your strength." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. Jake found himself acutely aware of Zara's presence beside him, of the faint glow she emitted and the quiet determination that radiated from her. "Jake," Zara said suddenly, turning to face him. "I want you to know, whatever happens when we return to Xerxes 9, I'm grateful for everything you've done. You've shown me a side of the galaxy and of humanity that I never knew existed." Jake felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the setting suns. "Yeah, well," he said, a bit gruffly to hide his emotion, "you're not so bad yourself. For an alien, I mean." Zara laughed, the sound like chiming bells in the evening air. It was a sound Jake realized he had come to treasure. Their moment was interrupted by Solaria's arrival. The guardian of Sanctuary approached with purposeful strides, her leafy features set in a serious expression. "It's time," she announced. "Our scouts have reported a gap in the Drekari patrols around Saxes 9. If we're going to make our move, it needs to be now." Jake and Zara exchanged a look, months of preparation and growing trust conveyed in a single glance. They were as ready as they'd ever be. "All right," Jake said, squaring his shoulders. "Let's go get that data crystal and show the Drekari they picked the wrong galaxy to mess with." As they made their way back to the second chance, now gleaming with its new upgrades, Jake felt a familiar mix of excitement and trepidation. The mission ahead was dangerous, perhaps even suicidal. But as he looked at the team they had assembled, a group of misfits and outcasts united by a common cause, he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Zara fell into step beside him, her luminous eyes meeting his with a silent question. Jake nodded, answering her unspoken concern. Yes, they were ready. Yes, they could do this. The second chance lifted off from Sanctuary, carrying with it the hopes of countless worlds. As they broke atmosphere and set course for Saxes 9, Jake allowed himself a small smile. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't face them alone. The final battle for the fate of the galaxy was about to begin, and at its heart stood an unlikely pair, a jaded human spacer and an Austrian diplomat, united by circumstance and bound by a growing bond that transcended species. Together, they represented the best hope for a future free from Drekari tyranny. As the stars streaked by outside the viewscreen, Jake Morrison made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would see this through. For Zara, for the countless innocents threatened by the Drekari, and for the man he used to be, the man he was becoming once again. The second chance surged forward, carrying its precious cargo of heroes towards their date with destiny. The galaxy held its breath, unaware that its fate now rested in the hands of the most unlikely saviors imaginable, uncovering conspiracies. The second chance dropped out of hyperspace on the outskirts of the Xerxes system, its newly upgraded stealth systems immediately engaging to mask their presence from Drekari patrols. Jake sat at the helm, his fingers dancing over the controls as he guided the ship through a field of space debris, remnants of the battle that had first brought him and Zara together. In the co-pilot's seat, Zara's luminous eyes scanned the sensor readouts, her brow furrowed in concentration. The rest of their makeshift crew was scattered throughout the ship, each preparing for their role in the daring mission ahead. "I'm picking up heavy Drekari activity near the planet," Zara reported, her voice tense. "It seems they've established a temporary base on the surface, likely to coordinate their search efforts." Jake nodded grimly. "Makes sense. They know how important that data crystal is." He keyed the ship's intercom. "All right, people, this is it. We've got one shot at this, so let's make it count." As the team gathered in the ship's small briefing room, Jake couldn't help but marvel at the unlikely group they'd assembled. Crix, the Volucrian hacker, was already interfacing with the ship's systems, his multiple limbs working in perfect synchronization as he prepared to slice into the Drekari network. Nara, the Drekari defector, stood quietly in a corner, her scaled skin reflecting the dim light as she checked and rechecked her weapons. Zev, the Morphin shapeshifter, seemed to ripple and shift subtly, as if practicing for the infiltration to come. "All right, here's the plan," Jake began, calling up a holographic display of Saxes 9's surface. "Thanks to Nora's inside knowledge, we know the Drekari have set up their base here, near the original crash site. A red dot pulsed on the map. That's where they'll be coordinating their search efforts, and it's our best bet for finding out if they've already located the data crystal." Zara stepped forward, her natural glow seeming to intensify as she addressed the team. "We cannot underestimate the importance of this mission," she said, her melodious voice carrying an undercurrent of steel. "That crystal contains evidence of Drekari war crimes across a dozen systems. If we can retrieve it and present it to the Galactic Council, We can put an end to their expansion once and for all. Jake nodded, feeling a swell of pride at Zora's transformation from frightened refugee to determined leader. We'll split into 2 teams, he continued. Zev and I will infiltrate the Drekari base, posing as maintenance workers. Our job is to locate the crystal if they have it, or find out where they're focusing their search efforts if they don't. He turned to the others. Crix, you'll stay with the ship, running interference on Drekari communications and providing us with real-time intel. Nara, I need you and Zara to head to the original crash site. If the Drekari haven't found the crystal yet, it's got to be there somewhere. As the team dispersed to make final preparations, Jake found himself alone with Zara for a moment. The Astrian's luminescence had dimmed slightly, betraying her anxiety. Hey, Jake said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You okay? Zara met his gaze, her alien eyes filled with a mixture of determination and fear. I'm not sure, she admitted. So much depends on this mission, Jake. If we fail... We won't, Jake interrupted, his voice firm. Listen, I've seen you go from a half-dead refugee to a key player in a galactic resistance movement. You're stronger than you know, Zara, and you're not alone in this. A small smile tugged at Zara's lips, her glow brightening almost imperceptibly. Thank you, Jake, she said softly, for everything. As the second chance entered Xerxes IX's atmosphere, cloaked and running silent, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. This wasn't just about finding a missing data crystal anymore. It was about standing up to tyranny, about proving that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, there were still those willing to fight for what was right. The ship touched down in a secluded valley, far enough from the Drekari base to avoid detection, but close enough for the teams to reach their objectives. As they disembarked, the harsh landscape of Xerxes IX stretched out before them, somehow both familiar and alien in the planet's eerie twilight. Jake turned to his team, taking in their determined faces one last time before they split up. Remember, he said, his voice low and intense, we're not just fighting for ourselves here. We're fighting for every world the Drekari have threatened, for every species they've tried to subjugate. Whatever happens in there, know that you're on the right side of history. With final nods of acknowledgement, the teams set off on their respective missions. Jake and Zev made their way towards the Drekari base, the Morphin's body already beginning to shift and change to match the appearance of the maintenance workers they'd observed during their approach. As they neared the base, Jake's mind raced with possibilities and contingencies. They had planned for every scenario they could think of, but years of experience had taught him that no plan survived first contact with the enemy. They would need to be quick, adaptable, and above all, lucky. Zev's transformation complete, they approached the base's service entrance. Jake felt his heart rate increase as they neared the Drekari guards, but years of operating in the galactic fringe had honed his ability to project calm confidence. They passed through the checkpoint without incident, Zev's forged credentials holding up under scrutiny. Once inside, the true scope of the Drekari operation became clear. The base was a hive of activity, with soldiers and technicians hurrying about their tasks. Holographic displays showed maps of the surrounding area, with particular focus on the region where Zara's escape pod had crashed. As they made their way deeper into the facility, ostensibly to perform routine maintenance, Jake's earpiece crackled to life. Crix's voice, tense but controlled, came through clearly. Jake, we've got a problem, the Volucrian hacker reported. I've managed to access some of their secure communications. The Drekari, they're not just looking for the data crystal, they're after Zara specifically. Jake felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? He whispered, careful not to attract attention. It seems the crystal was just part of their plan, Crix explained. They've been tracking Astrian energy signatures across the sector. They're developing some kind of weapon that targets Astrian physiology specifically. Zara's not just a witness, she's a test subject. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. This wasn't just about conquering new worlds anymore. The Drakari were planning genocide on a galactic scale, and Zora's people were first on their list. "Warn Nara and Zara," Jake ordered, his mind already racing to adjust their plans. "Tell them to be extra cautious. We need that crystal more than ever now." As Jake and Zev continued their infiltration, searching for any sign of the data crystal or information about the Drakari's true plans, Zara and Nara faced challenges of their own at the crash site. The area was crawling with Drakari search parties, forcing the unlikely pair to move with extreme caution. Zara's natural bioluminescence, usually a source of beauty, now posed a significant risk. She focused intently on the meditation techniques Silaria had taught her, dimming her glow to almost nothing. Nara led the way, had intimate knowledge of Drakari search patterns, allowing them to slip between patrols undetected. As they neared the epicenter of the crash, the Drakari defector held up a hand, signaling Zara to stop. "There," Nora whispered, pointing to a glint of something half buried in the harsh Saxton soil. "That could be it." Zara's heart raced as she saw the familiar shape of an Austrian data crystal, its surface marred by the impact but still intact. It was so close, just a few meters away. But between them and their goal stood a Drakari search team, methodically sweeping the area with advanced scanning equipment. As Zara weighed their options, her comm unit buzzed softly. Crix's voice, tight with urgency, filled her ear. "Zara, listen carefully. The situation is worse than we thought. The Drakari aren't just after the crystal, they're after you. They're developing a weapon to target Austrians specifically. You need to be extremely careful." The news hit Zara like a physical blow. Her people, already few in number, faced extinction at the hands of the Drakari. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a tangible force. It wasn't just about exposing war crimes anymore, it was about saving her entire species. With newfound determination, Zara turned to Nara. "We need a distraction," she whispered, "something to draw them away from the crystal." Nara nodded grimly, reaching for a small device on her belt. "I've got just the thing. When I give the signal, be ready to move fast." As Nara slipped away to set her plan in motion, Zara's thoughts turned to Jake. She hoped he and Zev were having better luck in the Drakari base. More than that, she found herself wishing he was here with her now. In the short time they'd known each other, the human had become a source of strength and comfort she hadn't known she needed. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the area, sending Drakari soldiers scrambling. Nora's distraction had worked perfectly. Without hesitation, Zara darted forward, her hands closing around the data crystal. As she turned to retreat, however, she found herself face to face with a Drakari soldier who had managed to avoid the chaos. Time seemed to slow as Zara locked eyes with the alien trooper. In that moment, she made a decision that would change the course of the mission, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Instead of running or fighting, she straightened to her full height, allowing her natural luminescence to flare brightly. "I am Zara of Australia," she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "And I will not let you destroy my people or any other." The Drakari soldier hesitated, clearly thrown by this unexpected display of defiance. It was all the opening Nara needed. The defector appeared as if from nowhere, incapacitating the soldier with a swift, precise strike. "Impressive," Nara commented as they fled the scene, alarms blaring in the distance. "I didn't think Australians had it in them to be so confrontational." Zara clutched the data crystal to her chest, her heart pounding but her resolve stronger than ever. "We all have hidden depths," she replied. "Sometimes it takes the right circumstances to bring them to the surface." As they raced back towards the rendezvous point, Zara's mind was already racing ahead to what came next. They had the crystal, but their mission was far from over. Somewhere in the Drakari base, Jake and Zev were still searching for answers. And beyond that lay an even greater challenge, convincing the Galactic Council to act before it was too late. The fate of entire worlds now rested in their hands. As the harsh landscape of Saxis 9 blurred past, Zara allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had taken the first step towards toppling the Drekari's plans. Now, they just had to see it through, no matter the cost. Triumph of compassion. The twin moons of Saxes 9 hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the barren landscape as Jake and Zev raced through the corridors of the Drekari base. Alarms blared all around them, the facility thrown into chaos by the explosion Nara had set off as a distraction. "We're out of time," Jake shouted over the din, his modified blaster at the ready. "We need to get to the rendezvous point." Zev, still in the form of a Drekari maintenance worker, nodded grimly. "What about the information on their weapon? We can't leave without it." Jake's mind raced, weighing their options. The data on the Drekari's anti-Astrian weapon could be crucial, but every moment they spent in the base increased their chances of capture, or worse. Suddenly, Crix's voice crackled through their comms. "I've got it," the Volucrian hacker exclaimed. "I've managed to breach their central database, downloading everything now, but you need to move fast. They're closing in on your position." Relief flooded through Jake. "Good work, Crix. We're on our way out." As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of Drekari soldiers. Without hesitation, Jake opened fire, his modified blaster cutting through the air with deadly precision. Zev's form rippled and shifted, taking on a more combat-ready shape as the Morphin engaged the enemy at close quarters. The firefight was intense but brief. Jake and Zev's surprise attack, combined with their advanced weaponry, gave them the edge they needed. As the last Drekari soldier fell, Jake couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. These were just grunts, following orders. The real enemy was the Drekari High Command, the ones orchestrating this galactic conquest. "Come on," Jake said, pushing the thought aside. "We need to get to Zara and Nara." They made their way out of the base, using the chaos of the alarms and the confusion caused by Nara's distraction to slip past the remaining security. As they emerged into the harsh Saxian night, Jake's comm unit buzzed. "Jake," Zora's voice came through, tight with excitement and tension. "We have the crystal. Are you all right?" A wave of relief washed over Jake at the sound of her voice. "We're fine," he responded, unable to keep a smile from his face despite the dire circumstances. "Meet you at the rendezvous point. And Zara, be careful. The Drekari are after you specifically." "I know," she replied, her voice grim but determined. "Crix told us. All the more reason to get this evidence to the Galactic Council as soon as possible." As they made their way across the rocky terrain, Jake's mind was already racing ahead to their next move. Getting off Saxes 9 wouldn't be easy with the Drekari on high alert, and even if they managed it, convincing the Galactic Council to act would be a challenge in itself. The rendezvous point came into view, a narrow canyon where the second chance waited, cloaked and ready for a quick getaway. Jake's heart leaped as he saw two figures approaching from the opposite direction, Zara and Nara, battered but alive. As the two groups converged, Jake found himself face to face with Zara. Her luminescence was dimmed, likely from the effort of staying hidden, but her eyes shone with a fierce determination he had come to admire. "You did it," Jake said, a note of awe in his voice as he saw the data crystal clutched in her hand. Zara nodded, a small smile playing at her lips despite the gravity of their situation. "We all did," she corrected him. "Now we just need to finish this." A sudden roar from above cut their reunion short. Drekari ships were approaching, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. "Everyone on board now," Jake shouted, ushering the team towards the second chance. They piled into the ship, Jake racing to the cockpit as Crix began the launch sequence. The engines rolled to life just as the first Drekari energy blasts struck the canyon walls around them. "Hang on," Jake called out as he pushed the second chance to its limits, the ship rocketing out of the canyon and into the turbulent Saxian atmosphere. What followed was a harrowing chase through the upper atmosphere and into the space around Saxes 9. Jake's piloting skills were put to the ultimate test as he weaved through debris fields and Drakari attack formations, the ship's new upgrades proving their worth with every evasive maneuver. Zara sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands flying over the controls as she managed the ship's energy distribution and defensive systems. Despite the chaos around them, Jake couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come from the wounded refugee he had found in the desert. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, Crix called out from his station. Drakari reinforcements incoming. Jake gritted his teeth. They were so close to escaping, but the window was rapidly closing. "We need a miracle," he muttered. As if in answer to his plea, a new alert sounded, but this one was different. A massive ship had just dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. For a moment, Jake's heart sank, thinking it was another Drakari warship, but then he recognized the sleek, organic lines of the vessel. "It's an Austrian ship," Zara exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief and hope. Before anyone could react, a transmission came through on all frequencies. A commanding voice, tinged with the musical quality Jake had come to associate with Austrians, filled the cockpit. "Attention Drakari forces, this is High Luminary Thaler of the Austrian Concorde. Stand down immediately or face the consequences of your actions." Jake and Zara exchanged a look of shock and relief. Somehow, against all odds, help had arrived at the last possible moment. What happened next would be talked about in hushed whispers across the galaxy for years to come. The Austrian ship, far more advanced than anything the Drakari had encountered before, made short work of the pursuing forces. Beams of pure energy lanced out, disabling Drakari ships with surgical precision without destroying them outright. As the second chance docked with the Austrian vessel, Jake felt a profound sense of relief mixed with lingering disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had secured the evidence and escaped Xerxes 9. The next few hours passed in a blur of debriefings and reunions. Zara was embraced by her people, tears of joy streaming down her luminescent cheeks. The data crystal was secured, its contents already being transmitted to key members of the Galactic Council. But it was the information Crix had stolen from the Drakari base that proved to be the true game-changer. The details of the anti-Austrian weapon, combined with evidence of other atrocities committed by the Drakari, was enough to galvanize the Council into action. In the days that followed, as the second chance and its crew were escorted to the Galactic Council's headquarters, reports came in from across the galaxy. The Drakari Empire was crumbling, its subjugated worlds rising up in rebellion as news of its true nature spread. The Council, finally shaken out of its complacency, dispatched peacekeeping forces to key systems. Standing on the observation deck of the Austrian ship, Jake watched as the swirling colors of hyperspace gave way to the glittering expanse of the galactic core. Beside him, Zara stood tall and proud, her luminescence fully restored and shining brighter than ever. "I never thought I'd see this day," Zara said softly, her eyes fixed on the approaching council station. "To think, all of this started because you answered a distress call from a stranger." Jake smiled, reaching out to take her hand. The gesture felt natural, right, despite their vast differences. "I'm starting to think it was more than just chance," he replied. "Maybe the universe has a way of bringing the right people together when they're needed most." Zara turned to face him, her alien features softened by an expression Jake had come to recognize as affection. "What will you do now?" she asked. "After we've given our testimony to the council." Jake considered the question. For so long, he had been running from his past, from connections, from anything that might give his life real meaning. But now, looking at Zara and thinking of the unlikely family they had forged on this journey, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. "I was thinking," he said slowly, a grin spreading across his face, "that the galaxy could use a team like ours. There's always going to be bullies out there, people who think they can prey on the weak. Maybe it's time someone stood up to them." Zara's eyes widened, her glow intensifying with excitement. "You mean continue working together?" All of us. Jake nodded. Why not? We've got a human ex-soldier, an Astrian diplomat, a Volucrian hacker, a Drakari defector, and a Morphin infiltrator. Sounds like the makings of a pretty good team to me. As the council station grew larger in the viewscreen, Jake felt a sense of purpose settling over him. This adventure had started with a simple act of compassion, answering the call of someone in need. In doing so, he had not only saved Zara, but had played a part in saving countless worlds from Drakari oppression. More than that, he had rediscovered the part of himself he thought he had lost forever, the part that believed in fighting for what was right, no matter the odds. The second chance had lived up to its name, giving Jake, Zara, and their newfound family a fresh start and a noble purpose. As they prepared to face the Galactic Council and share their story, Jake realized that their greatest adventures might still lie ahead. Whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. In the vastness of the galaxy, they had found not just purpose, but a home in each other. As the Astrian ship docked with the council station, Jake squeezed Zara's hand one last time. They exchanged a look of mutual understanding and determination. Whatever came next, they were ready to face it, not just as allies or friends, but as a family united by a shared dream of a better galaxy for all. The doors opened, and together, they stepped forward into a future bright with possibility, their unlikely journey having only just begun.